Greetings, everyone. Welcome to the very first and premiere episode of the Change of Shift podcast. I'm your host, Sean, with my wonderful co-host, Emily. Emily, good evening. How are you?
I am great. How are you?
I'm well. So,
Good.
how was your day today?
Well, in my other life, my significant other husband, Ben, co-owns a drop zone. So I was running Manifest all day today.
Well,
So
that sounds really boring.
we had beautiful blue skies, lots of happy people, and took, I think it was 18 people on their first skydive ever. So it was a good day.
Don't remind me. I know. I keep saying I'm going to do it. I know. So, sooner or later. So this is the Change of Shift podcast. Like I said, I'm your host, Sean. This is Emily, my co-host. This podcast is going to be a show about nursing, for nurses, anything and everything about nursing. The tagline that I think we are using and sort of borrowing is nursing meets the internet. Emily and I have known each other for 7, 8, 9 years or so. I guess we'll give a little bit of background about ourselves. We'll go a little bit out of order here. So, because I'm going to make Emily nervous.
Great, thanks.
For those of you who don't know, my name is Sean Dent. I've been a nurse for 10 years now. I currently am a acute care nurse practitioner practicing in a small, take that back, a urban shock trauma center. I've worked in critical care on my nursing career, and about 8 years ago, I started blogging as a nurse and have been doing it ever since then. Emily and I met many, many years ago when Facebook wasn't around, when Twitter wasn't around, and there was the only thing that you had to communicate between one another were these small things called blogs. And I believe Emily was doing this well before I was, along with a handful of other bloggers way back in, what was it, 2005, 06-ish? Oh, really? Even earlier than that. So that's when I started doing it, was 05, 06. So this podcast is going to be the evolution of what used to be the blog. So, Emily, tell us a little bit about you.
Well, I started blogging in 2003. Actually, I started my first blog before a blog was even in existence, and I think it was 99. So I'm an old lady when it comes to this. Unfortunately, I'm not and haven't been quite as consistent as yourself and some of the other bloggers out there, especially in the medical field. And there's a lot of reason to the lack of consistency that I think we're going to dig out over the course of probably the show and subsequent shows. As far as my professional background, I started in the medical field in the Army in 1996 as a medic. I spent time as an EMT basic on the streets of Los Angeles and Orange counties. Had a very wise nursing mentor tell me that, Emily, you should pursue nursing versus medical school, and that's what I did. Went to a small community college in Kentucky, working all sorts of odd jobs to include Domino's pizza delivery girl, which I was really good at. And started my true nursing career as an ICU nurse in Philadelphia while I finished my bachelor's and my master's bridge program. So I, too, am an adult acute care nurse practitioner. And Sean, we're going to be a dying breed here very quickly.
Dying breed, yes. The certification itself is being watered down and phased out.
Yep, which is a whole, we should probably write that down. That's a whole
list.
On the list.
List.
As another topic, which is politics and nursing. So since then, I've been a flight nurse for the last 9 years, have had a couple of other nurse practitioner jobs, and am in the process of transitioning to the next phase in my my nursing career as well. So
this podcast, kind of spawned from the creation of this forum, which for those of you who don't know, this is called Blab. It is a video chat app, and it is about as simple and easy as it gets to use. My social media career took a little bit of a detour recently. Oh, look, Ian's here.
Isn't that awesome?
Yeah. My social media career took a bit of a detour recently, and I decided to go off on a couple of my own paths, borrowing Ethan's wonderful moniker, Nurse Path. And I've been wanting to do a podcast for a long time. I think podcasts are the next best thing out there because they're wonderful for bite-sized pieces of information, but they're also great for more than a bite size, depending on how much time you decide to invest into it. And I had started a small mini podcast called The Nurse Niche, and it was just random thoughts while I was in my car. And a fellow nurse who is also an app developer kind of hinted to this video chat app, which is only about 2 or 3 months in existence. And ever since I've been introduced to it, I've been hooked on it. And it has a million applications to it. Recruited Emily into this. One of our good friends who's a physician and a blogger, Dr. Mike Sevilla, also part of this. And over the past 2 weeks, we've been doing these are called blabs, doing a couple blabs, just experimenting on how this would work. And it sparked an idea in me to start a show with a co-host, and pieces kind of fell into place kind of by accident and on purpose. But Emily and I have been, what's the word you want to use? We've been on the same path for a long time now. We have a lot of the same views. We've experienced a lot of the same things in both our personal and professional lives. And we both have a lot of experience with sharing our experiences to the social media world. And I thought this was a wonderful avenue to start that conversation. And more importantly is that this is a wonderful way to not only have a podcast, but it's also a way of interacting with the fans, with other nurses in real time. So for those of you who are first visiting this site, you can see that Emily and I are interacting through the video. I, as the host, can actually allow 2 more people to come in and actually chat with us. At the same time, off on the right-hand side of your screen, you're also going to see the Twitter feed. So anyone from Twitter who decides to jump in on this blab can join in on the conversation. So the applications and possibilities for this are actually endless. And up in the left-hand corner, it talks about is the actual topic of our podcast. We can change that as the podcast develops, even in a single podcast. So this app or this platform was a wonderful opportunity for myself and Emily to start sharing our experiences. The whole purpose of this podcast is to inform and educate nurses. I believe, and I think I've been told on more than one occasion, that with my amount of experience that I have and the amount of experience that we both have combined, that we have become somewhat experts in our field. And both of us being advanced practice nurses, both of us practicing as nurse practitioners, whether we like it or not, we have become leaders in our profession. And it's about time that I stepped up to the plate and started sharing this information with others. One of the reasons why I started a blog many years ago was to just get my voice out there and to, first of all, find out if all the crazy things that happened to me were only happening to me, or was this really what nursing was about? And it was also to share my views on the most common to the most craziest of experiences. And over the years, you and I both admit that we've met some amazing people, and it was simply because of social media and blogging.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. And I think some of the challenges that you and I have faced and gone through over the last 10 plus years at being at this is the corporate, we'll call it a leg at keeping up with social media and what social media can do. There are a lot of younger people who haven't. I mean, we've talked about the history of social media and why it was so important. And we need to continue to understand that we came from a time when a lot of bloggers were out there speaking anonymously. And now we're in a position where we have, I was too.
Mm-hmm.
I was too. And we're now at a point where we're putting ourselves out professionally in a profession that can be really sticky. We have to abide by HIPAA, which is something that you and I are very well versed in when it comes to social media. And I think that's been I don't want to say a detractor, because it's, patient safety, patient privacy is first and foremost, at the front of our minds in what we do. But on the flip side of that, being able to advance the profession and break down, Sean and I have talked a lot about breaking down silos in between, regionally, professional level of certification wise. And in order, I think, to do our best from a professional standpoint, we need to figure out a way to break down those silos and have these conversations. And this is why we're doing it. Sean and I aren't getting paid for this. Bloggers don't generally get paid for what we do. We do it because we love it. And fortunately, we have, and I'm going back to the outline, Sean.
Yeah, there you go.
We have a very, very strong foundation from nurse bloggers that started way back in the day in blog years, so to speak.
Yeah.
And that's where our title Change of Shift came from. And I think you can speak a little bit more to the history than I can.
Yeah. So ever since I started really aggressively blogging back on my own personal blog, I thought we were missing a piece that I so sorely wanted back in the world of blogging for nurses. For a lot of the nurses out there who are blogging, who I'm finding through Twitter, they've never heard of a blog carnival. They've never heard of the Change of Shift. And the blog carnival and the Change of Shift is what literally put me on the map as a blogger, as a nurse blogger. Blog Carnival basically is a blog hangout. It is a way of sharing multiple blog posts from multiple bloggers into one singular page. It's kind of like having a small blog party, and you can control who gets in and out of the door. And it's a way of not only sharing your own content, but it's a way of meeting, greeting, and sharing other content from other bloggers. The Change of Shift back in the 2005 era was just for nurses. And then I think, if I'm not mistaken, and you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but it spawned other blog carnivals for other professions, because there was a blog carnival for nurses, and then there was a blog carnival for physicians, the few physicians that were daring enough to blog back in those days. And a lot of it, like you said, was completely anonymous. Speaking of anonymous, we have yet another old blogger who's not a nurse, but a very, very dear friend of ours. Dr. Mike Sevilla keeps popping in and out. He actually coined, I think, the anonymous phrase, because he actually was Dr. Anonymous. And it was through his site and the Change of Shift blog carnival that I met you, as well as other bloggers. We talked about Drew earlier in this podcast. Drew's the one that drew me and then drew us into this Blab platform. And Drew was also a blogger back then. And the idea, I wanted a podcast. I wanted a co-host. I wanted this atmosphere, but I didn't know what to name it. Threw around a couple ideas, and then ultimately I decided that, why don't fix what isn't broken? I mean, the Change of Shift is a wonderful lineage. If you go back and just Google the Change of Shift, it'll take you to the original blog, which was Emerge blog, which was ran by a wonderful nurse and a wonderful blogger named Kim. She kept it going for a number of years. She actually kept it going. I think those last 2 years were very tough because that was the age of the microblog, and nobody wanted to do the long form blogging, and everybody was big into Twitter and Facebook, and nobody wanted to actually submit anything. So she was creating it all on her own. And I think she had it go on another 2 years before she finally decided to hang up her hat and say that enough was enough, and that it was time for her to move on from the blogging world. So I think that was back in, it's now 2015. So I think it was in 2011 that she finished it up. So it lied dormant for 5 years. I think there were a couple bloggers that tried to revive it, but failed miserably because of the fact that, blogs are not the most popular thing out there these days. I think that's why I kind of like this platform and this idea with the podcast, because there are more podcasts out there than I care to realize. I was using podcasts for other endeavors. I was using it not for nursing, but I was using it for my other coaching endeavors. And I found nursing podcasts. There's actually a couple of nurse practitioner podcasts out there. There's a really popular one out there that is up on the current month's Change of Shift, hint, hint, which is actually on my personal blog right now. I'll send that link here in a second here. That is ran by Jamie. And do you know Jamie's last name? I can never remember Jamie's last name. He has a podcast called The Nursing Show. And
so Jamie Davis.
I think you're right, Jamie Davis. I think you're right. He's been doing nurse podcast. Yes, he's been doing nurse podcasting for a long time. Having a difficult time copying my link right now.
So now we've kind of covered the history. We've talked about a little bit about who we are and our background. One of the things that Sean and I have talked about back and forth too over the last probably not as long as we should have, because this idea has kind of exploded between the two of us over the last week and a half, maybe.
Yeah.
Kind of the evolution of Change of Shift and pardon me, some of the challenges with long form blogging, short form blogging, the Twitter, the Facebook. How do you get all those things to work together? I don't know, especially in the medical field and nursing field and healthcare. There aren't very many people or very many groups that have really captured it. So our goal, or at least one of my goals, by the way, Sean, is to figure out a way to harness all of those different things and put them all in one place and have a conversation that doesn't just stop when the blog is that blog post is 2 or 3 weeks old and it's down the list and nobody sees it anymore. We want this to be a continuation and include everything from, video platforms, the podcast, like we said, but be able to tie those all in one place. Sean has multiple platforms he uses, as do I. And I think that's one of the things I've struggled with personally as a blogger, is trying to figure out where that niche is and figure out where my voice is, because it gets a little complicated to, it used to be you'd have your blog and you talk about, it was almost like a personal journal, but now everyone is so specialized that I think you run the risk of losing a lot of your audience by, talking about one thing and talking about another. And, I can talk about a lot of different things, but, the same people who are interested in skydiving really don't care about my knitting. So, and then you throw professional nursing in there and then it becomes pretty complicated too. So,
but I think that's the wonderful piece of this, is that we're going to talk about nursing, but we're not going to just talk about nursing, because nurses should never be just about nursing.
Exactly.
That's how you burn out. That's how you fry. I mean, if it's just blogging as an outlet, then that's great. But I think that's the whole point of this, is that it's going to be all encompassing, so that it's not just about the challenges that we face when we're clocking in and out, but the challenges we face when we walk out of the facility that we work in, or do you work from home? How do you handle the stress? What's good? What's bad? We're going to give you some tips and tricks on how to make it to 10 years, how to make it to the first year, you know? So this is where it's going to get fun, is because the old Change of Shift was simply blogging, blog posts from other bloggers. The current Change of Shift that I've created or revived, as in this particular month, is blog posts with a little bit of Instagram in there. Posted a couple of videos, I think, and of course a couple of podcasts, especially from Jamie that we talked about. So I think that's our goal here, is to try and harness, or should I say funnel, all of that into one landing page. Mm-hmm. And probably going to hit a couple bumps in the road to start with. We already have, ergo Sean couldn't get his sound to work.
You missed it, Drew.
Couldn't get my sound to work at first. So that was karma for my friend Drew. That was karma, me making fun of my friend Drew. So this first episode was just to get it out here, just to get the name out here, just to see our faces, just to hear our voices, just to get an idea of what is in store for you. We have too many ideas, that we're trying to figure out how to get it all into a some sort of cognizant format. Mm-hmm. You know, we have a lot of ideas, which is really exciting. Actually, Elaine brought up a good point. If you're here from Twitter visiting and you're liking what you're hearing, or if you want your friends to pay attention and come hang out, there's off to the left-hand side, it says "Tell a Little Bird." If you click on that, it'll actually share this particular show out on Twitter, and it'll draw people in. Mm-hmm. So by all means, please,
yes,
hit the Tell a Little Bird. So please we're gonna send you. We're gonna drop some links a little bit later in the show here, so that you can follow us on all the social media sites. But Emily, since I have completely gone off the rails and off of your schedule, where would you like to go next?
I think we should talk about a couple of the things and a couple of the ideas that we have. Well, actually, let me back up a little bit. A couple of the challenges that we found with Blab, and right now you see at the bottom of the screen that we do not have a third person on with us right now. And we have the ability to actually join in with video chatting closed. We have had a couple of episodes that we've done in other places on this platform in which we've had some drunks at the bar log in randomly. So what our hope is to have a little bit more structure. There are a lot of people aren't quite sure what to do with the platform yet. So as it evolves, we're going to try to keep a little bit more control over it and get it to a point where you guys know what to expect from us. So we have some structure to it. We don't want it to be overly structured, but we've also figured out the hard way that if we don't have an outline, Sean, we talk for 2.5 hours.
Yes, you're absolutely correct. You're absolutely correct. So the whole point of this is that
listen to us for 2.5 hours.
Because we really could talk for 2 hours and keep going. So
but the beauty is,
so we want to interview people. We want to interview nurses from all walks of life here. Anyone who literally is just stepping foot into nursing school to his signing the papers to retire. It does not matter. We want to hear from you. We want to interview you. If you have something of value to share with our profession, by all means, find us on the internet and contact us. If you don't know how to find us through the Change of Shift website that we share later, find me on Twitter, find Emily on Twitter, hit us up one way or another, because
absolutely,
this isn't going to work without your help.
Well, and the other viewpoint we really need too are patients, and every single one of us is also a patient. I know that Carrie from Sticks Until Me, yes, mm-hmm. Wonderful advocate for type 1 diabetes, and she's been a blogger forever as well. So without these conversations, we don't get that overlap and we can't support each other. So along with having a guest on our show, at whatever frequency we decide to have it at.
Wink, wink.
A wink, wink. With our crazy, crazy schedules. We also are going to have a couple of other little things. One of the big focuses is also going to be pulling in and utilizing the long form blog as well as Twitter, Facebook, etc., to be able to push out links so you guys know what you're going to get before you get here, know what we're going to talk about before we get here. So really utilizing the ability to pass that information back and forth and get other nurses exposure, because that's how we ended up here together 10 years later.
Yeah.
So God, I can't believe it's been that long.
That's crazy.
Amazing.
So, we kind of talked a little bit about each other. What's really funny is that Emily and I and the physician that we've talked about, Mike, we knew each other for 7 years.
Yeah.
Before we physically met in person. And that happened 2 years ago now. And it was epic. I'll just leave it at epic. Because what's really cool about that whole experience is that after 7 years of keyboards and monitors, meeting them in person it was as if I knew them from the beginning, or they were my neighbor, or we had been hanging out before. It was as if the conversation had never stopped, which was really cool. And I'm hoping that this podcast will help do that for someone else. Because many of the things that I found challenging as a nurse in the beginning of my career were a lot of the stress was alleviated just because of the blogging out there. And it wasn't just nurses that helped me. It was the patients like Carrie. It was the physicians like, Kevin MD and Dr. Mike Sevilla and Grunt Doc and people like that, that are still actually blogging to this day. Not as much as they used to, but they still do blogs. So they're too busy doing personal appearances and probably taking care of their actual job. So the whole idea here is to enrich and to provide value to our profession. One of my true passions, and one of the things that I'm going to abuse this podcast for, is to try and rid the profession of the horrible, horrible, horrible paradigm of nurses eating their young. Both Emily and I grew up in a time when nursing was that way. When it was, yes, doctor, no doctor, let me get out of my seat, doctor. And then it was the seasoned nurse yelling at you for everything that you did not know or could not do. And that you went through a form of hazing as a new nurse. And I'm here to tell you, as an advanced practice nurse, working with new nurses, both in school and right out of school, that does not happen anymore. And I make sure that every nurse out there feels comfortable with not knowing something. And I plan on using this podcast as a way of forcing that message out there. And I will use the term force because, quite honestly, I'm a little sick and tired of this nurses eating their young crap and the bullying and the horizontal violence.
Well, and Sean, I think that goes back and forth too between different positions within the healthcare field. I have seen it physician to physician. I have been the recipient, physician to nurse, and watched the horrible interactions, especially in the emergency room, between nurses and paramedics. Part of my licensure and certification, I'm not only a nurse practitioner, but I am also a paramedic. And it really fascinates me to see what happens when you walk to the bedside and people don't quite know what your position in that food chain is. And so I think there are a lot of opportunities we have that way. One of the things we talked about doing tonight is doing a mini interview process between the two of us. So I'm actually going to ask you some questions.
Oh, and I'm unprepared. So when
good.
All right, go for it.
All right. So as a blogger and as a professional nurse in the social media world and putting yourself out there. You've talked about the fact that you are very passionate about breaking down that whole nurses eating their young cycle that we've seen for decades and decades and decades. What other topics and what other things are you very passionate about covering?
New nurses, anything that has to do with new nurses. When it comes more specifically to like orientation processes, one of the positions I held, and one of the former jobs as a bedside nurse was that I was the orientation liaison. That was actually my title, liaison. And I truly took a liking to having some structure that when a nurse finishes orientation, however short or long that is, that they're as well prepared as possible. For instance, and I just quickly, as an ICU nurse, it's impossible to do. You can't get every experience. You can't see every illness. You can't see every sickness out there. But I want to create the scenario or create the environment where they feel okay or they feel comfortable coming off of orientation instead of being scared. So that's one of my other passions. You just said one. I could keep going on.
Okay, give me one. Give me another one that you like to, write about, speak about, find wonderful other posts about. What gets your blood boiling?
What gets my blood boiling?
Or makes you do the whole,
I do get tired of the screaming on social media. People don't talk on social media anymore. They scream on social media. And I think I'm coining our good friend Mike again. One of the reasons why he took a hiatus a couple years ago is that everybody was too busy shouting on social media instead of communicating, sharing, talking, creating dialogue.
Being supportive.
Yeah, being supportive. Well, yeah. So I'm spinning it again, but more specifically, being positive on social media as opposed to being negative. Everybody gets on social media and complains.
I think I said that to you today, didn't I?
Yeah.
That at some point I just have days where I just want to delete all my social media because it seems like everything you see is a tragedy or a starving dog or...
Well, no, I mean more specifically, you have the new nurses that show up on Twitter and all they do is bash their employer, or all they do is bash their coworker, or all they do is gang up on a coworker because the coworker's not in the clique. Or maybe they bash or make fun of the new doctor that is still learning how to be a physician. It's that negativity that just sucks the life out of you. Yeah. And that bothers me. You know what? If you have a bad day, you are entitled to it. You're entitled to bad coworkers and bad environment, sure. But how about you balance it out with positive and negative? You want to have some negative thoughts, you are entitled to share it in the most HIPAA compliant manner, but balance it out with positive stuff. So,
well, and I think that we're getting to a point now where we have to understand that everything we do online is putting your professional face forward. There are a lot of people that aren't as comfortable sharing. For example, with my blog, I tend to be very, very open about my personal life. A prime example of this, my mother was diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer 6 years ago. And I had a couple of blog posts that I had put up, and I tend to sometimes drop some not so nice 4-letter words. And in one of my very impassioned, emotional posts that I put up, I think I used the phrase F cancer. And it was amazing to me how many people trashed me for using the F word in something where I was so emotionally raw that there was probably a better way I could have put it, but I got my point across, and that's what I was looking for. Instead of hearing, wow, having a healthcare professional go through it from a patient and family side of it and seeing what cancer was doing to myself and my mother and my family, they latched onto a very strange part of what that was. So you're absolutely right. We see that, and we see that a lot. And it's always we have to remember that what we do as professionals, you know, it doesn't go away. The internet is here to, and once you put it
You
up,
think you can delete it off Facebook? It really can't. So
absolutely. So another question for you, Sean.
You're just letting them rip here, aren't you?
Yep, I surely am. All right. So we've talked about some of the things that you're very passionate about in your professional life. What about your personal life?
I'm trying to change the topic and it's not working. So maybe you can figure it out. I don't know.
Yeah.
What about my personal life?
Yes.
For those of you who have spent 5 minutes on social media with me, is that I'm passionate about health, overall health, not just about health care, but personal health. Yes, bacon, of course. Yes, I eat bacon on a daily basis. If any of you didn't know that, I do. So I'm passionate. I am also a coach. I coach CrossFit. I'm a level 1 trainer in CrossFit. I'm also a level 1 USAW weightlifting coach. And I'm also a USAW weightlifting athlete, a master's athlete. Easy on the age. So I like to use the phrase that by day I'm improving human health, and by night I'm improving human performance. Because every day after I leave work, I go and coach at my gym. And I've had the wonderful pleasure and opportunity to actually coach a national competitor who we both got to visit. Yes, we got to go to Dallas, Texas last month for the weightlifting national championship, which was a once in a lifetime opportunity, and I got to do that for fun. So, yeah,
that's awesome. That is awesome. Well, and I think that one of the things I'm very fortunate at after living on both coasts, living in the middle, and having such a well-rounded life, so to speak, that it makes it more, it makes it a lot easier to have conversations with patients. We run into people at all walks of life, all different, places in their life. And I think by being a well-rounded person, I think we can give better care, because unless you are able to emotionally connect with your patients, you don't have emotional buy-in. And once you lose that ability, then you can't be good at your job. That's part of being a nurse. So,
well, in my previous blogging employment, I talked a lot about balance, work-life balance. So I'm a big proponent of that. Many people ask me that question: how come I didn't become a physician? And my reflex is always, I chose to be a nurse. But the other part of that is that being in this profession long enough, look at that, good job.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, comment section.
Yeah, I tried twice. So the balance keeps you sane. It's how you prevent yourself from burning out. You can't be a nurse for 10 plus years and take the job home every day, take the stress home every day, because we literally do deal with life and death. We'll talk about it in future episodes, but, for instance, working in the ICU, you're going to take care of patient in bed 1 who is literally dying at your bedside, and go down to bed 2 with a patient who's crawling on a bed because they're confused and crazy and they're about to harm themselves. And then you got to go down to bed 3 because you have to revive them because they just had a cardiac arrest. And you have to have enough in your emotional bank to handle all of that without, and I hate to say it, it's our show, we can say what we want, without losing your shit. So,
yeah, absolutely.
You have to maintain your professionalism for all 3 of those families without miscommunicating in some way, which is very, very difficult to do.
Well, and it's having the ability to be able to walk into work and not take any problems you have in your personal life in there with you. all the things that I dealt with my mom's cancer, I'll just use that as another, as another part of this example. Dealing with that was very, very difficult. And then having to go to the bedside and give someone that energy that I really needed somebody to give to me was a huge challenge. And we need to find that link. Someone posted a very, very good post over the last 2 days, I think it was, about how it was an ICU nurse that went into a room and had cared for. Did you post that, Sean? Do you know where that is?
So there's actually 2 articles out there. So one of them was actually posted by one of my former bloggers that I worked with, Katie Kleber, who is Nurse iRoll. She's the one that actually wrote a book. She has a post about that. And then there was, I think it's Bree, can't remember her last name, but she also wrote one in regards to you have to be able to go from one room to the next without crying, without showing emotion, but then again, if you don't show emotion, you get faulted for that too. So that's the part of the nursing profession that people have the hardest part with.
Well, and they don't realize that we've been on that side of the bed.
Yeah. Well, hey, that's how I got into the profession. I was a patient. I got hurt. Yeah. So the 2 days I spent in the hospital, the first day was the most miserable day of my life, and it was with a quote-unquote female nurse, and the second day was with a quote-unquote male nurse, and it was 2 completely different days, and there was no change in my care in any way. It was pain medications. I had a physical injury. It wasn't like I had the flu or something like that. I had an injury that required pain medication and IV fluids way back when. And just the amount of attention that they paid was enough, or just the professionalism that every nurse out there, and I'm going to say this very clearly, every nurse out there is overworked, underpaid, and understaffed. Every nurse.
Yes.
But not every nurse takes that out on their patients. And that's the difference.
Agreed.
So that's what the day one, that nurse took it out on me because she had a bad day. So she was nasty to me. And then on day 2, he was completely calm, cool, laid back. He was just as stressed as she was, but he didn't take it out on me. And he actually said it to me out loud. We're a little understaffed. I'm taking on 2 extra patients than I normally do. And that was enough for me.
Right.
You didn't have to bellyache about it and be nasty about it. If you just simply, because I didn't need a lot. I didn't require a lot. But it was the compassion and the respect to not take your bad day out on me. And that's all it was.
My mom once told me, I love my mom, can you tell? My mother has been a very significant person in my life. And she once told me, Emily, it doesn't cost anything to be nice, but it will cost you everything if you are not. And I've always taken that to heart. It makes a huge difference in this profession. And you never know. You just never know.
Yeah. One of the nurses that I work with now asked me it most recently, do you ever have a bad day? You're always happy. Do you ever have a bad day? I'm like, I have bad days all the time. I just don't let you see it. I go walk away. I go to the back room. I go outside and scream or whatever. I go for a walk. I don't take it out on someone else. Yes, Drew, it's the coffee and the bacon. The coffee and the bacon. So, all right. Now we're going to flip the roles.
Uh-oh, here we go.
3. 3's the limit. We keep talking. So it's my turn.
3.14. So the limit's always pi?
Yes.
All right. I
we
think
went way beyond the 1.4 there. So I want to hear that. So
all right, bring it.
I'm going to try and think of 3 questions that are not the 3 questions that you asked.
Ooh.
This is going to be a little hard.
Yes.
Okay. So
oh no.
You mentioned, oh yeah, we're going there. You mentioned that you started blogging in 99, 2000.
I did.
And then all of a sudden, I know this, not everybody else knows this. You just dropped off the face of the blogosphere. Do you care to give us some insight on that? You don't have to give a long, detailed, but.
I think it was, there are a lot of personal reasons I did. Part of it was I was losing my voice. I was losing my ability to speak. I think it was a combination of some changes in my personal life. One of the things that you and I have spoken about, and we talked in a previous blab about this, I am a patient. I have, and I'm sorry, you probably hear my dog scratching at her collar in the background. She doesn't go, I can't go anywhere without her. No, I am a patient. And this is something that I hope to talk about at greater length in the very near future, especially in long form blogging. But I was diagnosed about 2.5 years ago with severe depression and generalized anxiety disorder. For a professional that was in the Army for 11.5 years, who has been a flight nurse for over 9, and has been at this very high stress, high adrenaline world. That was kind of quite a kick in the ass. I finally had a little episode at home and was told, you need to go in. And I finally bit the bullet and realized, and it took a very, very long time for me to be able to sit here and say that I have been diagnosed with severe depression and generalized anxiety disorder. And
yet another reason why you're part of it.
Absolutely. Because that's one of my passions. The number 22 soldiers a day. Mm-hmm. Soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines commit suicide. And that is a place I have been that dark. And I really feel that unless we talk about these things are not going to get better. We have to talk about them. And we can't just talk about them from a professional standpoint of, oh, yes, you need to meditate. Yoga is good for depression. You need to talk. Okay. It's our space. We can say what we want. That's all bullshit. Yeah. I'm not saying those things. I do use all those things. So I'm not saying they're wrong. I'm saying if we don't talk about it from I've been there and it sucks, it's not going to get better. So that's going to be one of my platforms. Wonderful. And thus, during that time frame, that was about the time that I went dark from a social media standpoint. And still feel that I'm digging my way out of it. And there are a lot of things that I can't wait to share about it because I'm finally ready to do that.
Good.
And I'm really excited to be able to finally have a voice and say, when the U.S. Army comes out with shiny little cards to help prevent suicide, that
oh, I tell you, you gotta love Drew.
So the dark side is cookies. I would be happier if that dark side had bourbon. So yeah, that is one of my platforms. And that's actually one of the reasons why I went dark for a while and have, very, very slowly found my voice back. And, I am very fortunate that I've had you and Drew and Mike to kind of drag me along and say, okay, it's time, Emily. It's time. So.
All right. So now for a lighter question.
Oh, thank goodness.
Yeah. You've been a blogger for a long time, off and on for a long time. Why should nurses blog?
Oh, my Lord. To have your voice heard. You have really got to figure out how to use that.
I sure do. Thought I had it down. I'm telling you. We need to share. We need to share who we are, what we do. We need to share the little things. How do you hang an IV on this pole? It's the little things and the little techniques that
make us more efficient. It is the voices that have the guts to say, I had a really, really bad day, or I am going through this very rotten period. I'm getting burned out, or I had this wonderful, wonderful experience over the last week in which, things started to click. I felt like I did my job. Unfortunately, with HIPAA, we have to be so careful with that. But we have an entirely new generation and a nursing shortage that's still looming. If we can't balance, like you said earlier, the good with the bad, and if we can't figure that all out and put a voice to it, it's never going to change. So, why should nurses blog? You don't have to long form blog. You don't have to figure out how to code. You don't have to do a lot of those things. You've just got to participate. And the support system that's here and the information that you get are just going to make you better at your job, better at your profession, and it will help prevent burnout. I can't say enough about how much you guys have supported me, even when you didn't realize you were, because you were still there and your voices were still being listened to, even though you didn't know it. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. So my last question for you, since you've spent most of your career as a nurse in a bird, why? No, let me change that.
Helicopter, not bird. Helicopter, not bird. They're
Sorry,
not birds.
I'm calling a bird. In my world, it becomes a bird because I can hear the bird coming from the helipad. So, why should a nurse choose flight nursing?
Oh, my word, there is no other thing like it. Wow. When I was still writing about, I think my dog finally laid down. You take two people, crew members. There are usually two crew members in the back of an aircraft. You take everything that you have learned, both hands-on, book learning. You take your knowledge base, you have a partner, and you have to try to apply all of that in something the size of the closet on its side, usually in the dark, taking away one of your five senses because you cannot hear. And you have to figure out how to keep that patient alive and or make them a little bit better by the time you get where you're going. We were talking the other day, someone was talking about transport nursing inside the hospital. And it is a really hard thing to do. You have to love it. You absolutely have to love it. But if you have that, and it's not adrenaline all the time. And that's the other thing I have to explain to people. It's not glamorous to scrub dirt and blood and puke at the back of the aircraft at 2 a.m. It stinks. But that's why they call it work and not play, right? Mm-hmm. But I've never felt more alive than when I was so challenged that you can't do anything else. And the piece that makes it just beautiful is when you have a partner and you have worked long enough with that partner that you don't have to speak about what you're doing. Things just flow and you get into this incredible groove. And you realize that you're able to do something that takes 10, 15 people in the hospital to do. So it is unlike any other part of healthcare. You get a little bit of it with emergency nursing. You get a little bit of it being a paramedic on the street, and it's probably as close to being a paramedic on the street as you can get. But you take that, you take critical care nursing, you take, we kind of laugh and say, part social worker, part respiratory therapist, and you slam it all into one thing, and you will never, ever be bored. There's always something new to learn.
On a smaller level, I can say that about critical care.
Oh, I miss critical care a lot, though. I miss the bedside. So
this is a great segue into a topic that we'll be revisiting quite often on the show. It's a hashtag that I created by pure accident on Twitter a while ago, and it's called Ask the NP. So it's hashtag ASKTH, capital N, capital P. And it became, I basically created the hashtag as a way of funneling pearls of wisdom or nuggets of information for nurses. I don't know, I wish I could honestly tell you how I went about finding or creating Ask the NP. I wanted a hashtag that I could use as my own that was, my calling card maybe. I don't know, but it seems to have worked out pretty well. It's been received very well. I share it on Twitter, and then I also share it on the Facebook fan page that I've had for a year now. And it's garnered a lot of good and bad attention, which is, in my opinion, good, because it's sparking a lot of dialogue and a lot of conversation. And you were talking about transporting patients. Maybe someday, Drew, maybe someday we'll get, shirt that says Ask the NP. I will say that apparently I'm not the only one that has tried to use the hashtag, because there's a couple people out there who are nurse practitioners or who represent a nurse practitioner who are using it on Twitter. So if you search the hashtag, I'm not the only one that comes up. So I'm trying to fix that.
And we talked earlier today about, how fortuitous that it was that you came up with that and the time frame that you came up with it in, because I think it'll help drive the conversation that we're having here as well. So I believe we're planning on utilizing that hashtag to bring in some nuggets of wisdom and some topical information towards the end of our tentative outline. So outline. We've
been all over the place. Now that we're going on 1 hour, I'm trying to, funnel the last little bits in here. So
one of the things that we didn't talk about is the fact that we're also planning on having a little pre-show, post-show. The pre-show, that way we can get all of our technical bugs worked out, so we don't end up getting kicked off. True.
I didn't get kicked off. It was a local problem. Somebody accidentally had Wi-Fi on when he shouldn't have, and I was hearing nothing. But the Wi-Fi was working great.
Local problem.
Yeah, it was a local problem.
But also that we are planning on having an after show too. So once we get done with the recording portion of this, that we're going to open it up and have it be a lot less formal. And in future episodes, we're also planning on having the call-in and the video chat open during the recorded piece as well. So tonight was simply a, get to know Sean, get to know Emily, figure out where we're going to go a little bit with the change of shifts, and kind of give you an overall kind of a viewpoint of where we're hoping to go with it. And my hope is that over the next however many years, this will evolve into something, and that conversation and the evolution will take place alongside what we realize people really need to see. And sorry, my other dog's trying to get in here.
Oh,
I've been gone all day, so
I have cats. So some of the topics briefly that I saved for the Ask the NP hashtag. One of them was the one that Emily has already discussed, which was transporting patients. The actual tweet or the update was, nurses, transporting patients within the hospital is an art, and you should practice it often. I don't think I need to go any further than what Emily has already talked about. There is an art to transporting a very ill patient, and it doesn't even have to be an ill patient. If you have a patient that happens to have a large body habitus that you have to get in and out of,
Right.
places. You have to plan ahead in transporting that patient from one place to another. You have to plan ahead in getting them from the bed to the cart, or from the table to the bed to the cart. So it does take some practice, and don't expect to be an expert at it the first time around.
Well,
Don't,
and complacency kills,
yes.
especially in my profession. If you are not prepared for every outcome, mentally and physically, logistically, so that's one of my other, we
Hmm.
talked about my first big passion when it comes to, me personally, but also professionally. It's definitely both intra and inter-facility transports. It's absolutely an art form, and it's frightening. It's very frightening when you're at the nurse at the bedside and have to take that patient on multiple drips to MRI.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
so as I know, we are on probably where we at with a time there,
Oh
Sean.
no, I'm all right. I'll survive. So we'll
Okay.
get through the last bit here. We'll get through the last bit.
Okay. So we talked about Ask the MP,
Yeah.
and I think we're on to talking about what we have in the future.
Yeah.
More
So
specifically, what we have in the future.
yeah, specifically. So first of all, Emily and I want to at least share our condolences, um, publicly, at least on our show. For those of you who follow
Mm.
the news recently, and for the nurses out there who ever heard of the website allnurses.com, as if I don't remember if he was the actual founder or not. He was one of the founders. Um, Brian Short. His name, yes, I always forget his last name. Brian Short and his family were found dead this past week, in a apparent murder-suicide. There's still details that are being released, and the last story that I heard, at least from the link that I just submitted here on the site, is that it seems that Brian murdered all members of his family, including his wife and his daughters, and then turned the gun on himself. And it's a morbid but very sharp reality check. I know that Emily already briefly talked about, and I hate to use the term mental illness, but mental challenges, emotional challenges. I'm not going to try and predict or even guess at what happened or the events that led up to it. We are simply just offering our condolences that
Absolutely.
he was, to use the word presence is not enough. He established a presence, him and his company established a presence on the internet for nurses that I don't think will ever be repeated. He started All Nurses, I think, as an old chat forum, if I remember right, and it still is to this day, a chat forum, but it developed into so much more now. And the last I heard, the site itself, or the company itself, was $1 billion company, if I'm not mistaken. So we're just offering our condolences, and the fact that if you have the chance to go take a look at the story, as we get more information, we will absolutely share what we find. As a segue into that, unless you have something to add, Emily.
No, I think you've covered it really well.
As a segue, we have a number of guests that have already expressed an interest in our show. I've
Yay!
reached out to a couple of them already.
I'm not that good at multitasking, so I'm glad you're on it.
We actually have a nurse blogger who blogs on her own personal blog called Nurse Code, and she's actually she's a columnist on allnurses.com. Her name is Beth. She's been in the nursing world for a number of years. I believe she's into the 10, 20 plus years as a nurse. She's a nurse educator now. The little bit that I remember reading about her professional life. And she's been on the blogging scene for the last couple years. She wrote a blog post recently thanking me for helping her find her voice. Me and a handful of others, I definitely am not taking credit for that. But that just goes to show the power that social media has when it comes to nurses sharing their experience and their voices out there. So she has expressed an interest, and she'll be a guest on our show.
Oh, awesome.
We have a brand new nurse. I believe Megan has been hanging out with us for a while now.
Hey, Megan.
I think she actually hung out with us from the beginning here. Megan.
She was logged in when you couldn't be.
Yeah, I know. What was that? Is that you? Oh, I don't know. Did you hear that?
No.
Okay, just me then. Anyway, so Megan had a little glitch there. I found her blog. I think I found it on Twitter. Or it might have been from another blog that I saw her on. She has a blog called Mighty Nurse Megan. I believe she's telling us now she graduates in May. She is doing her very best to share her experiences and her voice out there in her brand new blog. I do not know how long she has had the blog out there. I do know it's fairly new. She actually is part of the current Change of Shift blog Carnival post that's up on my site right now. So she has graciously accepted an interview with us. And one other one who is a nurse who I found, it was one of the emotionally charged posts that this particular blogger posted, and it was called The Diet Coke Incident, a Mass Exodus of Bedside Nurses. Excuse me. She goes by the handle Flo is Dead, as in Florence Nightingale. Yes, Flo is dead. She likes to remain anonymous, so she is not divulging any other information other than that handle. She hasn't actually accepted to be a part of the video portion of our podcast. She would gladly do either a blog questionnaire or a audio interview. So we may have to figure out how we're going to have to swindle that one.
Which is part of our goal. Doesn't just have to be blab, but it can be, so many different ways and so many different platforms for communication. So that's exciting. Well,
congratulations, Megan, for having that blog for 2 months. 2 months.
You've probably been more consistent than me lately.
Yeah. So
I'll just say it before
we will be eager to pick your brain.
Absolutely.
So, and there's a couple other nurses that I haven't actually contacted yet. I believe it was actually mentioned in our Twitter feed earlier when I was talking about nurse bullying. There's a nurse out there by the name of Renee Thompson that I'm going to contact. She actually is local. She lives or resides within hours of where I live.
Nice.
Her and I have talked on Twitter, not recently, but she actually is a huge proponent of nurse bullying. She actually has an entire website dedicated to nothing but bullying. And if I'm not mistaken, she has published a book. I'll have to double check on that one. So I'm going to reach out to her as well. Emily, do you have anyone that you have in mind that you're interested in, haven't contacted in? Come on the spot.
Ian showed up earlier.
I already contacted Ian.
Yeah, I know.
He hasn't responded yet. So
I'm hoping that's why he popped up today.
Yeah. So
yeah, I think I think that part will evolve as well. I may try to get some people local to me. I have a couple in mind that aren't necessarily big on social media or aren't big on social media yet. So we'll see how that pans out. So I've got some stuff up my sleeves, so to speak. So,
would you like to start the thank yous? Unless you have something else you would like to.
Let me see. I think the one of the big things that we haven't talked about, I actually spent the afternoon after Sean set up the platform working on a new website to go along with the Change of Shift. It is currently the thechangeofshift.wordpress.org.com.
Nope, wordpress.com. I'm literally sharing the link now.
Okay. That too is going to undergo, like we started this a week and a half ago. So,
Literally.
so we're still working out some of the technical parts of it, but we'll have a website that goes along with this podcast. So anything that we talk about here, it's a little bit difficult to keep all those links rolling, especially when you're new at this, like we are. But it will be a collaborative place for the two of us, and hopefully a place for some of the guest bloggers as well. But a place that we can put all these links. So keep your eye out on that.
We're going to be on all of the social media sites. So we're in the process of creating an entire brand, my friends here. Yeah. So you're not going to get rid of us in any way, shape, or form. So we're here to stay.
Amen.
Yeah, so we'll start with just the Change of Shift blog, and then that'll evolve into the website. I'm going to be recruiting the expertise of my co-host to help with that. So last but not least, we'll talk about some thank yous.
Big thank yous.
Big thank you here. So I want to thank Drew. Drew is the reason why we're doing what we're doing right now. Mostly because of him finding Blab and sharing Blab. But more importantly, there's Drew's handle right there. If you don't see it there on the right-hand side, but Drew is also a nurse. He was a wound care nurse for many years. Hasn't been practicing as much because he's pursuing one of his other passions now. He is an app developer. He creates apps for mobile devices and other platforms. And he just recently, last week, if I'm not mistaken, re-released the premiere
issue?
What am I going to call it? Issue? Geez, brain fart. Premiere issue of his magazine called Podcasting Magazine, which is a wonderful link between what Drew is doing here and what we are trying to do now. Drew has been heavily in the podcasting world. Like I said, Drew is one of the old dogs when it comes to the old bloggers from yesteryear. So Drew's been around the scene for a while. This particular platform and everything that Emily and I are doing right now would not happen without the help of Drew. Drew was instrumental also in helping me, brainstorm some of these ideas for this particular show. And down below here, I'm actually sharing Drew's podcasting magazine there on iTunes. So be sure to check it out. I believe this magazine is for podcasters across the board. So it's not just about healthcare. It's about anyone that is interested in podcasting.
But that flips back to the importance of being well-rounded.
Ding, ding.
Yep.
Well done.
Thank you. So, and our other huge thank you is, Mike, if it weren't for you, we would not have any type of framework for what we're doing tonight. And I'm hoping you're putting them. Oh, I am. No. Okay. We're putting the links up there. You were the first person that I saw. And the reason why I think, Sean, you and I even connected, was it was even pre-Blog Talk Radio. I don't even remember the platform before that.
Well, it was Dr. Anonymous was on Blogspot, if I'm not mistaken.
Phew, long time ago.
I remember that very well.
So thank you. We don't have enough thank yous or thank you pictures of beer to buy. If it weren't for your leadership in social media and healthcare, none of this would have happened.
Yeah, so the little organization that we have had during the show tonight is due to Mike and giving us a framework for how to run a show. We're stealing his idea of doing the pre-show and the post-show to bring in more viewers and to garner more conversation. But without Drew and Mike helping us, this show would not exist. So
we have gone way long.
Oh, I know. Ridiculous. So
you're stealing what?
I'm stealing one more thank you and thanking my co-host Emily for accepting this venture, because so far it's been a lot of work with little return right now, but this is the first time that I feel 100% passionate about this. I've been kind of rooting around ever since I lost my social media footing, which we can talk about another time, but went back to my personal blog and tried the podcast on my own. And while it's doing okay, this is something I'm really, really, really passionate about, because the conversation can be so enriching here. So,
well, and a little bit of shout back, Sean, if it weren't for you. I'd have been in bed sleeping by now.
Well, technically I should be in bed sleeping, but
it's I can't tell you how great it's been over the last week and a half to realize that I think, the final piece to the puzzle for getting my voice back. And it's a whole nother world for me. So thank you. I'm excited. Thank you, everybody, for stopping by and giving us some love this first night.
Yeah.
We'll tighten the ship up a little bit. And
yes.
It will be posted on thechangeofshift.wordpress.com.
Yes.
So thank you, Sean.
All right. And any parting words before?
Yes. Always, always, always to make sure you check your own pulse first.
Oh, love it.